All right, let's talk Colorado Buffs. What a difference 1 week makes. Obviously, last week's rivalry matchup didn't go well, but this week, handling business against Colorado State, big time victory for the Buffs. But I think it's part of a smart move and sort of long term strategy. We're starting to see it come together for Colorado. I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, look, we all saw the Colorado Buffs with just a physically dominant performance on the road against a rivalry opponent. Those are always tough matchups. They got it done up front in the trenches, and obviously some of their great skill players like Sanders, like Hunter, stepped up as well. But I think we saw Coach Prime after the game give a nod and a wink to a very critical position group that stepped up big time. Let's pull up this report courtesy of Bleacher Report. The Colorado offensive line was the focal point of some criticism, probably darn near all the criticism, following the team's 28-10 loss to Nebraska. But Buffalo's head coach Deion Sanders recognized the unit with game balls after Saturday's 28-9 victory over Colorado State. As for the offensive line, Sanders had a much different tone during the celebration than he did following the loss to Nebraska. Great darn victory. Offensive line was phenomenal. Did a great job not only run blocking, but pass blocking as well. We did what we needed to do to come out here with the victory. Sanders was sacked 5 times against Nebraska, but the offensive line was much better against Colorado State. That allowed the quarterback to sit back in the pocket and pick apart the Rams defense while going 36 of 49 for 310 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Yeah, I mean, incredibly night and day effort. We're seeing this offensive line come together and give Coach Prime credit where it's due here, recognizing the offensive line after the game. Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. But first, Buffs fans in the comment section below. Obviously, Sanders was outstanding. Travis Hunter was Travis Hunter. But give us your MVP for this big time Buffs victory. Was it Hunter? Was it Sanders? Was it somebody else? Really curious what you guys have to say. Give us your thoughts. MVP of this 28-9 victory, and put them in the comments section below. But Miles, what are your thoughts on this latest Buffs news?
Yeah, Nick, from the story, it sounds like offensive line MVP. You go out, you have an absolutely terrible showing against Nebraska, bounce back, great game against Colorado State. I think it was pretty night and day, like you said. There were a couple of changes made throughout the offensive line. Justin Myers moved from right tackle. Philip Houston, the transfer, comes in starting at right tackle for the Buffs. But I think that's what we're seeing here. I think we're seeing something that we talked about at the beginning of the season. Early on, the Buffs, a lot of new faces on this offensive line. I'm about to go detail those in just a second. But we've said it is going to take them time to gain cohesion. Offensive line is a very tricky beast. Defensive lineman, pretty easy. You can plug and play different guys, and it's not going to mess up the cohesion very much. Offensive line, different animal. And with Colorado, all these changes, we should have expected it to be this way. We did. And I just think everybody else is now seeing the result of, okay, they got a couple games under their belt. Now everybody's coming in. And you look at what is going on for Colorado's offensive line. You've got Zelinkus. He's a center, that sophomore. He's been there for a year. But outside of that, you got Khalil Benson. This guy, transfer, came to Colorado this year. You look on next to him, you have Seaton, the rookie. You have Houston, another transfer. And also you have Brown, who isn't a transfer necessarily, but he did have to sit out all last season as a redshirt after he transferred from Jackson State in 2022. So not any playing time with any of these other guys. He's basically a brand new face to this offensive line. So only the center is really the person that has any sort of playing time with this group at all. So I think we're starting to see what Colorado did. They went out this offseason. They really hit the transfer portal hard. They hit recruiting hard. They got a lot of new guys in. It's going to take them a second to get better, get some cohesion, but we're starting to see that right now. And I think Colorado is going to look very different going forward from now on.
Yeah, I think what was so impressive to me about this victory is this was the first time in the Coach Prime era where the Colorado Buffs won a game and Shurter, Sanders, or Travis Hunter, or a combination of their big stars, weren't the only reason why. This was the first game where they were clearly and undeniably physically superior to their opponents, right? And I think that's a great sign for the Colorado Buffs going forward because that was the big question mark. We know Shurter Sanders is absolutely redunculous. We know Travis Hunter's one of the great players. I think he should be the Heisman favorite, to be totally honest, with everything he does on both sides of the football. We know those guys are phenomenal, but the reality is this team, the Colorado Buffs, will only become a quality football team when they start winning games because of the trenches. You can't rely on your star players game in and game out, especially if they're getting killed. And what we saw on the road, rivalry matchup, those are always tough, right? It happens every year. You can almost throw out the records a little bit. You got to go in a hostile territory in a rivalry game. Those are really tough battles, especially for offensive lines. You're dealing with crowd noise, you're dealing with some chaos. This group up front did a phenomenal job. They won this game physically. They averaged 5.7 yards per carry. That's with obviously the 1 sack, only surrendering 1 sack on Shedeur Sanders. So again, it's actually when they actually had design runs, it was over 6 yards a carry. So they physically won this game. They protected Sanders, 49 passing attempts, only 1 sack. So 50 dropbacks, 1 sack. That's a 2% sack. That's pretty darn good. That'll get it done. And I really like what you said there about the fact that it's going to take some time to figure out this offensive line, because one of the things that the Colorado Buffs have done with their emphasis on transfers is they've structured themselves essentially like an NFL franchise in terms of how they use transfers. Like a team in the NFL would you use the offseason, which is a great strategy. It's a smart move. But the reality is, anyone who follows the NFL, you know this, it usually takes a month into the NFL regular season for teams to figure out who they are. Like, okay, who's our left tackle going to be? That didn't work. We got to put a different guy in, or we got to shuffle some things around. Everyone knows this in the National Football League, that it takes a few games to figure it out. Everybody does. But for some reason, there are some detractors or just stupid people in the media who, even though college football has become basically like the NFL with the transfer portal, suddenly now just assume that week 1, oh, these are all guys that have played together for 5 years. That's bonkers. That's ridiculous. It's asinine, right? We're starting to see who the Colorado Buffs are going to be. We're starting to see the strategy come into place from Coach Prime and his staff. And one final point here, I think it was just a stroke of genius and a really smart move to give the offensive line the game balls after this victory, because everyone was really critical on Sanders, talking about Shedeur Sanders and Coach Prime last week with how they said negative things about the offensive line. They called them out publicly. A lot of people didn't like that, but guess what? This group up front responded, and this time they get the praise, right? I love that from Coach Prime. Sometimes it's the stick, sometimes it's the carrot when they do well. Smart move by him in terms of leadership. And I think right now, Buffs fans, I think honestly, this would be the most exciting you should feel this entire season. If you can win games physically on top of having great athletes, you can really make some noise this year.